You're watching This Week in Louisiana Politics with Fred Childers.
Well, good morning. I'm Shannon Heck. Thanks for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Politics on your local election headquarters. Louisiana's abortion trigger laws are on hold right now after an Orleans parish court put a temporary restraining order on them. With years of laws on the books, there is confusion over what is actually in effect. Anna McAllister explains the latest move by the courts.
Court hearings and controversy. Monday, Orleans Parish Judge Robin Geruso issued a temporary restraining order on Louisiana's abortion ban, saying it's too vague. Abortion rights advocates agree with the judge's decision.
They're kind of chaotic and complicated. They weren't written well, and she agreed that they're unconstitutionally vague, that they don't have clear procedures on when they go into place.
However, anti-abortion advocates say they expected this to happen.
Louisiana Rights Life is not surprised at all by what we believe is a frivolous lawsuit. We do trust that our trigger law will protect unborn babies, especially now that Rosa returned.
But it isn't black and white. Loyola law professor Isabel Medina explains this temporary restraining order will make Louisiana lawmakers provide clarity to the statutes.
All Judge Geruso has done is said, essentially, that there are grounds for the plaintiffs to make this argument, that the statutes do not give fair notice of what exact conduct is prohibited and what exact criminal sanctions you are running afoul of if you engage in any of the conduct.
Medina adds Judge Geruso's upcoming decision would not prevent Louisiana from banning abortion, but it would require lawmakers to revisit the current law.
Should Judge Geruso grant a permanent injunction, that they would have to go back to the statutory process and enact a new set of statutes.
Anna McAllister, WGNO News.
Now, Attorney General Jeff Landry is sending a stark warning to doctors. If they perform an abortion, he will pursue charges, even though the state's abortion ban is currently on hold. Right now, it is unclear if he has the legal authority to do so, but abortion rights attorneys say that he can't do that, and he's just trying to scare doctors. A reminder, under Louisiana's trigger law, doctors who perform abortions could face a big fine and years in jail. And Baton Rouge attorneys are now offering free legal services to people impacted by Louisiana's abortion laws. While the laws are on hold, lawyers say that people are still scared. The group is with the Fair Fight Initiative. They say their services could help doctors, women who want to terminate a pregnancy, or district attorneys who are charged under the law.
We plan on standing in the gap into fighting for women and those who believe in a women's right to choice. Whatever that looks like, we're going to be there for it.
The attorneys say they agree with the pending lawsuit which says that the law banning abortion is too vague, and they plan to continue to challenge the laws in court. And on the other side, Attorney General Jeff Landry says that he is prepared to defend the state's laws in court as well. And a federal judge has rejected a request to reinstate a law requiring doctors who provide abortions to have admitting privileges at local hospitals. The law was blocked by the federal courts in 2017, citing precedent under Roe v. Wade. But with Roe now overturned, the state health officials argue that this law should now be enforced. Abortion's rights advocates have said that the admitting privileges requirement would likely close clinics in Shreveport and Baton Rouge. U.S. District Judge John DeGravels says that he would not make a quick decision and ordered full briefing on the issue. And as that legal battle over the abortion law continues, protests across the state can be found nearly every night. Abortion rights advocates marched from the state capitol to the governor's mansion on Wednesday, and protesters say that their rights have been stripped away and they feel lost. Advocates from all different social and economic backgrounds say that they are united under one message.
Church and the state should be separate, and I think that we're moving in the wrong direction.
I hate to bond over trauma, but I think that we are having a collective trauma session.
Another protest in Baton Rouge took place on Thursday night. Anti-abortion activists commented on the legal action and protests by saying, quote, "Through Louisiana voters, the Love Life Amendment was passed in 2020 to ensure that no right to an abortion can be found in Louisiana Constitution," end quote. Now switching gears to redistricting, the United States Supreme Court has allowed Louisiana's challenged congressional map with only one majority-minority district to be certified. The final decision will hinge on the court's decision on Alabama's map in the fall. The night before a hearing in federal court where a judge has demanded a second black district, the U.S. Supreme Court has blocked any further movement on the case and has certified the GOP-backed map with only one minority district.
This is a very sad moment in our history, and it's in line with what the Supreme Court has been doing over time, which is just chipping away at every single right that has been given to people by previous courts.
Republican leaders in the legislature are celebrating the move, with Senator Sharon Hewitt tweeting, "I am very pleased that the U.S. Supreme Court agreed to halt the chaos created by Judge Dick's earlier order and is allowing Louisiana's congressional races to proceed with the map enacted by the legislature, which we have always maintained is constitutional," end quote. The hearings set for Wednesday and the Fifth Circuit trial in July are now canceled. Some fear the Alabama maps, which Louisiana's final decision will depend on, could strip what's left of the Voting Rights Act.
That the Louisiana legislature didn't even attempt to draw a second majority district. They didn't have any interest in ensuring that what we know, 1/3 of the population should have equal representation.
The GOP map will be used for the fall elections this year, meaning only one majority-minority district will be considered. The hearing for the case will not take place in the Supreme Court until October of this year. Louisianians have gotten a chance to weigh in on what the new Election Day voting machines should look like. The process of finding the new machines has been controversial over the years, but the state is nearing a conclusion. I was at the meeting to hear what comes next for our Election Day voting system. Voting machine vendors got to make one more pitch to Louisiana lawmakers and election officials before they make their final recommendation to the Secretary of State's office of the kinds of machines they want the state to purchase. Louisiana has been using Dominion machines for over 30 years, and there's been a push to replace the machines that have been in service since the early 2000s, but public trust in the process has been thin. Now with calls of fraud, there's nervousness around the machines.
A lot of questions are being asked about the possible manipulation of voting machines with regards to those types of systems that include barcodes or QR codes.
Vendors did a show and tell for officials earlier this week to see how their systems work. The commission is leaning towards machines that tabulate handwritten ballots and have multiple archival checkpoints in the process. They also want machines that are easily audible.
There has to be some component of constantly improving our system, addressing problems. You know, we could be buying equipment that's not yet VVSG 2.0 certified with the expectation that the vendors that we're working with are going to be working towards that.
Hours of public testimony took place, including a visit from famed Mike Lindell. The commission heard many false claims of election fraud, but a common theme was a call for those paper ballots. There are still a few more steps in the process before the final vendor is selected of who will be providing these machines to the state, and there'll be several more public hearings through the Secretary of State's office before that decision is made. At the Capitol for your local election headquarters, I'm Shannon Hecht. This week, Representative Jeremy Lacombe from New Roads has announced that he is running for State Senate District 17. The district is currently occupied by Senator Rick Ward, who recently announced his resignation after the special session. Lacombe says that he has co-authored legislation that has secured Louisiana's largest infrastructure investment in 30 years without raising new taxes. The Democrat credits his accomplishments to putting aside partisan politics and working together. The election for that seat will be this November. And additional help is on the way for Hurricane Ida victims who are still struggling to get back on their feet. The Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness is launching a new program offering free guidance from disaster case managers. They'll connect you to available recovery resources, provide assistance with FEMA appeals, and assist in developing a personalized disaster recovery plan. For more information and to apply, go to getagameplan.org. And a bill that would help make sure college students don't go hungry was signed into law. Rachel Riley spoke with lawmakers who drafted the legislation to find out how they're hoping to help the kids.
Well, I'm excited that it got passed, and I'm even more excited that the governor signed it today.
State Representative Barbara Freeberg's bill called Hunger Free Campus would address a population in need, and that's college students.
This bill would encourage colleges and universities throughout this state to have an organized way of looking at food insecurities on their individual campuses.
Working with the State Board of Regents to establish a grant program and send money to help colleges get things like nutrition counselors to help struggling students.
Over 30%, and I was shocked by that number, of students in college campuses in this state have food insecurities.
A word that essentially encapsulates the idea that there's not enough food to eat and there's not enough good and healthy food to eat.
Food insecurity affects more than 20% of Louisiana households.
Things like worrying food would run out, food bought did not last, could not afford balanced meals.
Black households are experiencing the bulk of it. Candace Myers with the Pennington Biomedical Research Center says they have found factors like the pandemic and inflation to worsen these problems.
That kind of started with COVID and are prolonging around food prices, employment.
Pennington Biomedical plans to take a closer look into the sex and race disparity in the state. Rachel Riley, NBC Local 33 News.
Coming up, calls continue to pour in to close the Bridge City Juvenile Detention Center and a look into an investigation at the East Baton Rouge Prison.
This is your local election headquarters.
Welcome back. 4 Baton Rouge Police Department officers are now on administrative leave as the department investigates alleged wrongdoing. One of those cases led to the arrest of former BRPD officer Benjamin Zarang, who was accused of stealing firearms. The names of the 3 other officers have not yet been released. Police Chief Murphy Paul is trying to reassure the public, saying, quote, "We want the community to know that these few bad actors do not reflect the mass of the professional, hardworking, and dedicated men and women of the Baton Rouge Police Department," end quote. And cries grow for the governor to close the juvenile detention center in Jefferson Parish. Bridge City's neighbors made their pitch to the parish council this week to close the facility after a number of riots and escapes. Jordan Lippincott reports.
They're not kids. They're hardened criminals.
An emotional meeting of the Jefferson Parish Council Wednesday as people who live in and near Bridge City, as well as council members, called for the closing of Bridge City Center for Youth.
I mean, I don't know what is of a more grave concern than prison breakouts.
Louisiana Office of Juvenile Justice Deputy Secretary William Summers says since the last escape, there's now additional staffing at the Juvenile Detention Center, but that most of the escapes have happened because of maintenance issues. But those who live in the nearby neighborhood say it's a public safety issue.
I hear him talking about the maintenance of the facility. What about once they get out of the facility? There's nothing stopping them from coming into our community.
They say the center has been problematic for years.
But at the same time, I had teachers when I was in elementary school that worked part-time there. And there was a guy that took a 2x4 to the face.
The council unanimously passed the proposal, but Summers says his work to improve the facility will continue.
We want to be good neighbors. We want to make sure that we fix this place in a manner that it should be. And that's what we're trying to do every single day.
Jordan Lippincott, WGNO News.
The East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office is defending claims that the air conditioning inside the prison is not operating by saying it's not true. But one local coalition says that they've heard otherwise. Following their monthly visit to the EBR Parish Prison, the East Baton Rouge Parish Prison Reform Coalition says that they were horrified when they were met with screams coming from inside the prison. In a video provided to our station by the Prison Reform Coalition, it shows an interaction between a prison guard over the alleged conditions.
2 days to 2 months till air conditioning gets
2 months. And you see how hot the sun is? Is it working right now? Did y'all put in a work order?
A spokeswoman for the department says that they have investigated similar claims already. We asked to go inside the prison to see for ourselves, but we are still waiting for a response. The FBI is now investigating sex abuse allegation within the Catholic Church of New Orleans. According to the Associated Press, more than a dozen alleged victims have been interviewed. The case centers on whether priests took children across state lines to molest them, a crime that falls under federal sex trafficking laws. The Archdiocese is facing bankruptcy as it deals with a flood of sex abuse lawsuits and allegations that church leaders turned a blind eye to predatory priests. After the break, we hear the latest on the bipartisan gun reform legislation that has recently passed, and the Supreme Court makes a few more landmark decisions before the end of the term.
This is your local election headquarters.
In the wake of protests against gun violence and the U.S. Supreme Court's decision to expand gun rights, Senator Bill Cassidy said compromise starts with enforcing preventative measures. Danielle Johnson reports.
Senator Bill Cassidy is walking a fine line between strengthening the right to bear arms and preventing those weapons from getting into the wrong hands. He says the compromise starts with enforcing preventative measures, like the newly passed bipartisan bill signed in response to the Uvalde, Texas shooting. The bill will allocate about $12 billion for mental health services and bolster security in schools.
If you care about the Second Amendment, you've really got to care that people who should not have weapons don't have them.
However, gun violence also exists outside of the classroom, which Cassidy says is a cause for legislation to tighten up gun laws.
Look at the four of the main areas where we're having deaths from guns. Rampage shootings, we address that. Domestic violence, we address that. Criminals, we address that. And then teen suicide. And all these measures are something to address those issues while we strengthen protection for Second Amendment rights for the law-abiding.
He says strengthening protection of the Second Amendment also looks like increasing the consequences of mishandling a firearm.
Because otherwise, it gives a bad name to everyone who does believe in the Second Amendment.
Cassidy says when it comes to who decides whether or not the individual is fit to carry a gun, the decision is up to a judge.
It has to be evidence of a certain quality. And the person who's having their gun rights deprived has to have access to an attorney. And has to be able to see the evidence and has to be able to confront those who are saying that he or she should not have it. So we have increased evidentiary standards, strengthening Second Amendment rights. But we also say that if you're a guy that beats up your girlfriend, and you're convicted of that, then you can't go out and buy a gun and go after her next week.
The United States Supreme Court has handed down some landmark decisions in the last days of this term. Multiple big cases were decided on the final day on Thursday. Trevor Shirley reports.
Of these two final rulings, one gives a sweeping opinion on the future of climate protection, while the other gives a major win for the Biden administration. First up, a case involving a dispute between the Environmental Protection Agency and power plants. The court ruled 6-3 along ideological lines that the EPA does not have broad authority to regulate power plant emissions. Advocates for climate protection say this ruling is a major blow against efforts to protect the environment. It could also complicate the Biden administration's efforts to fight climate change. And in this term's final ruling, the court rules in favor of the Biden administration, saying it does have the legal authority to end the so-called Remain in Mexico policy started by the Trump administration. That policy required asylum seekers to stay in Mexico until their claims were processed by immigration courts. The Biden administration was sued by red states who argued the policy should have to remain in place. Today's ruling gives the White House the green light to end the Remain in Mexico policy, a win for President Biden. The decision was 5-4, with the court's 3 liberal justices joining Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Brett Kavanaugh in siding with the White House. And with these 2 final rulings, the court's term is now over. Oral arguments on new cases begin this coming October. Reporting in Washington, I'm Trevor Shirley.
Well, up next, we'll have a look at the week ahead on your local election headquarters.
This is your local election headquarters.
Looking ahead to the coming week, the hearing on the abortion trigger laws will take place in the Orleans Parish Court on Friday. This will decide the fate of the currently blocked laws. And there will be no Baton Rouge Press Club in observance of Independence Day. Thank you for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Politics. I'm Shannon Hecht. I'll see you here next Sunday on your local election headquarters.